Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fourth installment of Consultants Corner for this year. Today, we are continuing on in our exploration of EHP, or Environmental and Historic Preservation. We have a special episode that includes feedback from actual users. And take it away, Dov and Ilya.
Good morning and welcome back to all those returning. Welcome to our new attendees. First of all, it's great to see that many of you have been in touch with your GHSC rep about the EHP, right? They are there to help you. They're going to help you turn your documentation into your official submission. So if they have questions, they can almost be like the gatekeeper. So there's no perfect, there's no win. If there's questions, they'll let you know and you'll go back. But as David mentioned, today is kind of a special session. We appreciate all your patience as we navigate, jumping between people's EHPs that were they offered to do a live review. So thank you. And hopefully all the other attendees can learn from the questions that are presented and from the details that we discuss. Thank you. And also, just before we continue, next slide, please. Let's also remember that we don't speak for any of the agencies, right? We have our guidance, we have our experience, almost a consultant, if you will, and we give our best thoughts and guidance to help you through, especially some of the gray areas. Some stuff is definitely laid out, right? The EHP form is laid out, what to fill in here, what to fill in there. But the reality is there's a lot of gray area questions, plus part that is very important to us, myself, Ilya, the whole team, is the actual security applications of how you use the funds. And your EHP is kind of your first step into really designing that system. It doesn't have to be perfect. The goal is for your EHP submission, but it allows us to kind of start thinking and start putting together the documentation for potential vendors and bids. So just recognize, final answers, final determinations of what you're submitting is from your agencies. Obviously, in this case, the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, and FEMA, the federal agency that administers this grant. I'm going to stop on this one today after I speak through it and turn it over to Ilya. Let's clarify a couple things. First of all, EHP, the Environmental Planning and Historic Preservation Documentation, is a requirement only of grantees of the federal nonprofit security grant program. You probably already see several acronyms on this slide. If you look at our first session, right, our Consultants Corner webinars build on each other. So it's hard to kind of just jump in the middle, or we're just never going to move forward. But this, let's clarify, it is not for applying for any grants. It has nothing to do at all with the state hate crimes grant, the SCAHC. It is specifically for those of you who have received the federal NSGP. And if you have the most recent, the state, New York State DHSES has requested you submit your grant by January 6th. That's this week. Is there some wiggle room? I can't say for sure. It's the first year I recall that they had such a hard deadline. I think they're just trying to keep everyone moving, keeping the momentum so you don't fall behind on your grant. That being said, let's make sure we hit that deadline. So this slide, we introduced it on our last session, and we hinted at it in our first session. These are our CSI's suggested phases. If you went to your rep and said, oh, we're in phase whatever, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. This is how we broke it up for manageable chunks to understand where you can't move forward, where you're at. Obviously, it's a very simplified piece of the process, right? We're going to go into depth on EHP today and continue from our last session. But again, if you have an NSGP, you should have already executed your contract. We talked a little bit about that in an earlier session. Again, the instructions are pretty clear from the information you got from your rep, but we want to keep moving along. And as we move forward, we'll reveal more and more of this, what we call our flow chart. So you can see we are in the process, but we don't want you to get ahead of yourself either, or you could potentially get not reimbursed. You could potentially have other hiccups. If we keep with the flow, you'll be in a good spot. With that being said, until you get your EHP approved, you cannot move forward. You can prepare some documents, but you can't really move forward in the procurement process, hence our stop sign. So just be aware of that. This is a very important piece. And with that, again, a little bit of patience today. We have a lot of slides to jump through and a lot of locations to assist. Will hopefully be about 10 to 15 minutes per. And we're ideally going to focus on the pictures of their EHP. The forms are a little more straightforward. We recognize there are some questions there, and obviously Q&A at the end. So thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to Ilya, and I'll be here at the side as well for any questions I can help with.
Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year. Thanks very much for everyone for everyone's patience as we're going to repeat a few things that you have seen during previous sessions. Why is this important? Is because there's a lot of terminology, and we often hear from client facilities that they're struggling to just decode all the terminology that's being thrown at them. So, in the interest of everyone's sanity, we try to offer just a refresher on what we had talked about last time. And in this case, what does EHP mean, what it stands for? And also on this page, you'll find two useful links and also QR codes, which you can point your mobile device to, and it's going to take you to the right website for some useful resources for EHP preparation. With that, one question that often pops up: what is needed for EHP? And here's a simple list that's been put together by Dishes to give you guidance on what you need to put together. Right, so EHP screening form, which we're going to see some live examples today. Last time we walked through a blank form with some guidance from the state, but this time around, we are very lucky to have three representatives from facilities that have been doing this for some time now, and they will share their experience and the forms that they had prepared. You need to have labeled color ground level photos of the project site. There's a lot of labeling for color photographs and where the equipment needs to go. All of that we will try to demonstrate to you today to give you some examples, right? And we did offer generic examples that the state team has put together. And so take note of this list, double check that you've prepared everything. And to Dov's point, it doesn't really make sense to move forward until you have gone through the exercise of addressing every item here. Okay, so next is something we offered last time, and I want to go through this really quickly, so let me put all of these things here on the screen so they're all readable. It's just the way they show up here is slightly grayed out, but it's not a big deal. So grant administrators are not in the position to offer security advice. We talked about it last time. It's very important that you understand that. Okay, they're administrators, they're bureaucrats, they understand how to get you through the process, how to cut through red tape in some cases and help you move along with your projects, but they cannot offer you security advice. Okay. Obviously, you have the help from the CSI team, and please rely on that as well. Before you get your annotated photos together, please plan your ideas about how to protect your facility. Okay, that's going to give you a little bit more, I guess, bandwidth into preparation of your EHP, particularly the photo, the set of photos with labeling, because you have to be specific by location of each device and improvement. Consider whether your requirements are realistic. We see facilities who want a lot of bells and whistles, and unfortunately, they struggle to get the basics done. For example, they'll want access control and video surveillance, but they haven't really figured out how to protect their doors and their windows, right? So those are things that we tell you in the next bullet. Your perimeter protection should be first priority. We cannot stress this enough, because incidents of the past or recent past indicate that sturdy windows, walls, and doors on the perimeter are actually your first line of protection. Then obviously compiling annotated photos, and this is just a trick that I know that facilities have used before. Using PowerPoint is one of the easy ways to actually get your set of photos together, annotate them, put labels on them, and then convert that to a PDF when you send it over to your grant rep. We also advise that facilities sequence the EHP photo file following concentric circles from outside moving inward to the facility. I won't belabor this further. You can go back to a previous webinar to get more information about that. Don't forget to plan for monitoring stations and the main security equipment room or closet in your facility. Oftentimes, people only focus on devices around their facility, video surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and physical hardening. But technology needs to be connected somewhere, and that somewhere is best located in an isolated room under lock and key, and it has to have proper ventilation in order for the computer equipment to work consistently. So, and at the same time, people who operate or who have access to your electronic systems for the reference, for investigative reasons, or for live monitoring reasons, they need proper computer equipment to see what the camera is showing to them or what access control system is telling them. So all of that signal needs to be seen in one way or another. The best way to do that is obviously through a computer workstation. So that also has to be part of your consideration. And I cannot stress this enough. The CSI team is here to support you, and it's been growing in recent months. And obviously you have a team of people who are dedicated for specific boroughs of New York City and now Rockland County. So please rely on the team to ask any questions. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So now, Dov, if you could help me introduce the first participant, and thank you so very much to all the three participants that we have today. I have to apologize because I'm going to be driving some of the background technology as I'm showing you the slides. So I'll ask Dov to make the introduction while I'm looking for the files to open up. And we're going to start for each of the presentation. We're going to start with the EHP form, and then we're going to move on to the EHP photo set, if you will, with labels. All right. So Dov, over to you.
Sounds good. All right, we're going to start today, and again, before anything gets posted publicly, we'll clean up the information. So this is just for those of you on this webinar. So be mindful of your colleagues' information they have shared, and again, we appreciate it. And Ilya will take your slides through.
Please tell me if I pulled up the form, if everyone can see. Dov, somebody please tell me if we're at the right location here. Yes? Yep. Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. And we're grateful that sometimes it's challenging for folks to just step up and start talking about the things that they've been doing, because as we've always appreciated, everyone wears multiple hats. Okay, so we're grateful that you're able to spend this time with us and walk us through what's been going on your side as far as the EHP is concerned. Please, I'll ask for your guidance to perhaps start. I suppose this is just a disclosure, so we don't need to spend much time on that. I'll start off here for section A, and please guide us what you've been doing and some of the challenges that you've had, and also some of the information that you've shared in this form.
So the first thing we were confused about, which you can see, is project title. What do we call this? So we would be inclined to call it our 2022 NSGP grant, but we're not sure why they're asking for a specific title. Can you help, Ilya?
Right. So thank you for asking that. So we typically see a variety of things that are kind of coming up, and it's good that they give you a separate line just below it to identify your address, and above that you also state the name of your facility. So you don't need to include those bits and make this line too long, right? So for project title, typically what I see is a security improvement project, right? You can be a little bit more descriptive to say that physical hardening and technology improvements for the facility, something of that sort. Now, I don't believe there is a hard requirement to make a specific name. There's no nomenclature to make a very specific name. One thing that I'll clarify with Dov, if you don't mind, is do clients also have to include any project codes? I know that it's kind of redundant because they may be included later on in the form, but Dov, can you please clarify if besides just coming up with a general name, do people need to include project codes in the project title?
I think at this point, because most of the codes are with dishes, this is being the FEMA document, I don't believe so, but I'm going to confirm as we move through.
Yes, David.
I would suggest in the title, They want a title because they're going to be looking at lists of grants. And it might be helpful, Sandy, instead of being just generic NSGP 2022, say your initials, NSGP 2022, and that would be helpful for them.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, because this is not our first grant. So I also had the thought of like differentiating it by the sequence. But I think that SWFS 2022 NSGP security is fine.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Sandy. So as you can see, my professional recommendation is to just kind of make sure that whoever is reading this understands that it's a security improvement project. They see so many documents, so much information, but I really appreciate that David is able to also give you a little bit of nomenclature so that you kind of keep track of documents as they come through and as you complete them. And hopefully you're keeping up good filing systems on your end, because facilities apply every year for different grants. So in order to make sure that you can always make the right reference and share the right documents should it be necessary later on, surely you can label it, even though in the upper portion above the project title text box, you also have the grant program to 2022 NSGP, and so that is pre-filled by the state that you, or by your grant rep that you get the grant form from. Should we scroll down, Sandy? Do you have any particular area that you want to stay on? So there is a project description here. Do you want to walk us through this section?
So I tried to stay consistent. I like your idea of the photos being outside in. I tried to stay consistent with the order of things that we contracted for. So the language here is almost identical to what was in our approved contract.
Okay, so I like how you.
So like I can go through what we were contracted for, but basically it was a cut and paste.
Understood. Okay. Dov, David, any ideas here? I like that it's all consistent. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're simply sticking to the language that's already been approved. And so that's the project description. I like that you're including costs associated with it. Now, keep in mind, we've had this question asked repeatedly. Can we reallocate? And yes, there is room for you to reallocate if you see that your needs are slightly different, or maybe the situation changes, right? Unfortunately, threats are very dynamic, and so security has to be adaptive. And so, of course, you have opportunities to talk to your grant rep and say, well, we don't need $85K for 17 doors. We want to have, I don't know, $70K. For that type of project, because we will make changes to the way we operate our facility and maybe reduce the number of perimeter entrances, something of that sort, right? So any other thoughts, ideas, Dov and David?
Sure, I'll add this. Once it's in our grant application, right, we're putting out our wish list almost. But once we put it in our EHP, that can almost be, and I think we said this in the last session, that can almost be, the specific items you have to install and exactly where. So if you're able to figure out a way that you're comfortable listing it a little more generically, that still says what you want to do, right? So I see, and it's, it sounds like from one of our assessments, the 10-minute forced entry resistant doors. And again, we 100% agree with that. But if for some reason, because of cost or because of availability, you have to go with a 5-minute forced entry. And I'm not saying to reduce the standard. I'm just saying it gives you that little bit of flexibility, or to say we want 4 cameras here and 5 cameras there, saying external and internal cameras to provide this coverage. Obviously, in the pictures, you're going to have to specify. But, if you have a 360-degree camera, that's 1 camera versus 4 cameras. So it potentially could pigeonhole you. So if you could come up with ways to keep that a little on the generic side, could keep the doors open, for lack of a better way to put it.
And thank you, Dov. And another thing I will add here is that it might be useful to make cross-references between what you're writing here in the form and your EHP photo set document. Okay, so that PDF that you're going to be sharing as well, where all of your labels are, right? So I'm not saying cross-reference page to page, but I'm just saying that maybe as you broke it out here section by section, so you have 4 sections, it seems, you could make references to the photo set that you have just a little bit more closely, so that folks know, okay, I need to go to pages such and such of that document.
Dov,
Elia, you mentioned revisions, and one of the considerations, if you do a revision within the same AEL, that's pretty easy to do. So if you say I want, different kinds of cameras, for example, that's pretty easy. If you are changing AEL categories, Albany has to go to Washington and ask Mother May I. So it's going to take longer, and consult your regional security director to make sure that you have a good case to ask for what's called an IJ a budget modification.
Well, yeah, let's hold IJ mods to another session and stick
Yes.
with our, hopefully, everything's in line where we need it now. But before we jump on it, Liron, one of our regional security director for Long Island, did you have a question?
no question. I want to add about this paragraph. So first of all, this is a very tricky one because it's limited by, you cannot put a lot of words in it. It stops you in one point. And this is, okay, now in this case, you managed to do that, but if the project is longer or more expand, then it's going to be a hard thing. It's also recommended to indicate exactly what you're going to do and use the words like, if you're talking about cameras, so you talk about installing cameras and you have to say mount them to the wall. If you're talking about keypads, the keypads are going to be fixed to the wall. Use words as fixed, mounted, so you describe what you're going to do. This is what they're looking for.
Thank you, Liron. Ilya, for the sake of time, maybe let's switch it over to pictures.
Sure. And before we jump there, Sandy, do you have any other particular sections of the form that you wanted us to advise you on?
So, by the way, Mira is extraordinary and has done much of this work, but I don't know, since I have my picture and voice and she's in a noisy room. But Mira, is there a particular part? I think there was somewhere that we had a question. Do you remember?
I don't
think,
guys, I don't think you can mark 2 in the upper page. Go up. I don't think you can mark 2. I think the best thing is only to choose only 1. And
no, actually, if I recall correctly, if you look at the way Dishes marked up the blank form as a guide, they said to mark both 1 and 3.
Yeah, 100%. I'm looking at it right now.
Yep.
So you have to mark 1 and 3?
Yeah,
1 and
says
3
check
must be
both
marked.
boxes.
Yep, must be marked. And again, Liron, see, this is where for everyone, this is such a kind of dynamic education, because previous years it could have been different. The guidance keeps on
I
being
was in the
updated.
webinar last year and they said only mark 1, so this is
Exactly. So this is why it's so important that we kind of repeat these things. I apologize, Sandy, I interrupted you. Is there
No. I'm not holding the form in front of me and I don't remember where we had a question. I'm not sure if Mira remembers where we had a question. We did this after the other and we didn't finish it. So
I understand.
We were kind of more stuck on the pictures, quite frankly.
Sure, no problem. So why don't we switch over? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this one and we're going to jump over to your pictures. I will definitely not go to the live slideshow because those tend to be tricky on Zoom. So we're going to stay in this particular mode, which is also helpful for everyone to see that your team particularly is using PowerPoint to get everything ready. Okay, so I'm a huge user of PowerPoint. I think it's one of the underrated pieces of Microsoft software, believe it or not. As many gripes as people have with Microsoft, this is one of the platforms that's worked really, really well for me. So take it away, Sandra. Just tell us what you're looking at.
Right. So the rectangular building in the center of this photo is our building. It's we clipped it from Google Earth. It's hard to see in this view, but it names our building and it also names the school next door.
Sure.
It shows the alleys to the east and west and 68th Street to the north and the alley behind us. So it gives an aerial view and it also has our address, which we were told to put on every page. We added the phone number in case there was a question.
Elia, can you zoom in a little bit so people can see better?
You mean the photo? Or?
Yeah.
See, it says,
and we can also see the adjacent facility names, York Prep School, and then on the other side is New York Buddies. I suppose it is a daycare facility or something like that?
not any longer, but yes.
Got it. Okay. So a typical suggestion for me, again, for historic kind of guidance, because people will work on a file and then it might sit there for a number of months. So when you open it up, or when a new person opens it up, they really struggle to understand what is this for, like when they look at the first page, right? So typically I recommend to actually add what is the purpose of this, right? So in addition to the name of your facility and the address, it's a good idea to actually add security implementation or an NSGP 2022 security implementation, something of that sort, right? I like when that goes either in the footer on every slide so that it's consistent, so people know, and especially if you print this and people have to flip through pages and maybe the document gets separated, it's easy to refer to the file. And the same goes for the file naming. Is again, to David's point, 2022 NSGP security improvement project, SWFS, right? So something of that sort. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the next photo. These are introductory photos, everyone. So please understand that what we're looking at is not yet labeled fully to indicate security improvements. So this is just what the building looks like to introduce the grant rep, the readers who are making the decisions about whether to approve this EHP as to what this facility is about.
So it's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
We don't have a full-on rear view of the south side of our building. In order to get that, we'd have to get on the fire escape of a rear building. We used these two photos the last time we had an NSPG grant, so we're using them again, but we may be able to get a full-on rear view. We have to trespass in order to get one.
Sandy, I wouldn't worry about that because that's the back of your building. It's the courtyard, so to speak. And you're already off service because you're a landmark.
Right.
So they don't have to, you are officially a landmark, so that, that's one of the issues that this is, a historic preservation form. They know that you're a landmark. They will be double checking with the Landmarks Preservation Commission in New York City to see if your proposed changes, would require any further landmark approvals.
So David, this raises an interesting question because we have LPC approval. Part of our grant is for more cameras, and we already have an LPC approval, Landmarks Preservation Commission approval for the locations of the cameras. And I was thinking of amending our documents with that, just to say here, this has been approved.
I would certainly submit it as part of the this package that you have LPC approval. You probably have a certificate of no effect.
Exactly.
I'm sorry to be technical here, but you know, again, if you have any documentation that'll speed this up, you know, they don't have to jump through quite as many hoops if you give them the information. And the whole purpose is to get through this as quickly as possible.
Okay, so then we don't have photos. The next page is right now blank. We need to go outside and get an east and west facades and stick them in. Next page. So now we get to this interesting question that
By the way, excuse me, Sandy, if you can't get there, put in not accessible.
Oh, great idea. We can actually, I think.
Okay, so, you know, put in, this is the best photo we have.
Got it.
Don't drive yourselves crazy here.
In this instance, the modifications that we're going to be making are both on the exterior and the interior, or the outside and the inside. But with all of the perimeter doors, at first, Mira, I need to sing Mira's praises at every turn. Mira had only, not this particular image, but had only the inside of a door. And I said, show the outside too, so they have a context, but you may disagree as we go through this. So this is the door from our ramp. It has where there's the intercom, so and the access control tapper. So we put an arrow there because we're going to need to change the reader and the intercom. And on the inside, where there's intrusion detection and door hardening, we also put blues. Like you can see the magnet up at the top of the interior of the door. So you should comment on this presentation.
Right. So a couple of things here. You're already doing, you're meeting so many of the guidelines that have been offered by dishes. And so you're stating your address. You're actually being specific to the actual location of the door in question and the upgrades that you're looking to implement. One thing that I recommend in order to keep the readers engaged and for them to actually understand the context, not only our photos and the address and your the language that you're putting in there about what improvements you're suggesting, but also color coding the types of improvements you're looking at. So if it's a physical hardening, it would be one color. If it's access control, it would be another. If it's video surveillance, another color, and intrusion detection, another color. Now, I say this, and I know that people may feel like it's a little bit too complicated, but if you offer a sufficient legend to demonstrate, like, you know, blue means video, this is because when I, as a reader, I see all blue, I kind of get lost as to what you're trying to do here. Okay, because for example, the two blue circles on the photo on the right, if I look at that without reading what you're talking about, they kind of all blur for me. I don't necessarily understand what you're trying to accomplish. So just try to be as descriptive and as clear in these instances as possible. And I apologize because obviously in the interest of time, we have two other participants. We won't be able to go through every single photo because you have multiple slides here. How about you guide us maybe to some of the particular slides that you wanted to highlight and maybe where you have some questions, and we can give you more guidance on that. Are there any
So
locations?
again, so I guess if you move to the next, please.
Sure, yeah.
So, so here's like, it's interesting because the outside, really those circles, you're not, the physical impact, what you'll see is not on the outside, it's really only on the inside. But we didn't finish our editing. So it should say will be fixed, replaced on the inside. And we haven't yet noted where will be hardened, where the screws go. So would you just have it there like outside for reference? Or would you omit Mira will kill me because she didn't have the outside to begin with. But I thought it's confusing just to see the inside and not have the outside context.
I'll tell you this. So, and I know that we have a very big mix of participants. For some, if let's say it's just one person trying to do all this, it might get too convoluted and complicated to get all of these photos organized in the way that you did. I applaud you for having done so. I like clarity because you're presenting this to people that you cannot assume understand what's going on in your building. They don't understand. Like they're going to look at your inside of the door. They're going to say, "Where is that?" Well, I don't like. It makes no sense to me, right? So the more clear you are, and in this case, I like the fact that you're using both outside and inside, and I like that you're kind of being very clear about articulating what you're doing at this location. It's just I would just maybe change the colors of the circles and arrows just to stick with the types of systems and improvements you're trying to do, and offer a legend, as you go through your slides. So for me, this works. Dov, David, any other comments here?
I'll just add the legend is super critical, right? Whether it's the shape or the color. So it's not about getting specific into your hardware at this stage, but it's about being clear to EHP the items that, if we're looking at this picture of a door, what's being installed there, access control generally, door replacement generally. And like Ilya said, that legend on one of the first pages is going to be a huge saving grace to help guide through. So that way you just put camera each time and people know it's a camera, a red circle or something, a red star is a camera, however you do it.
Right. So I guess, so basically what I'm taking away is where it says inside, and we have 3 things typed in words: intrusion detection, security camera, door hardening. Basically, we need to double down on our dots and have them consistent, even with the language. So if intrusion is red, there'd be a red dot there and a red dot image. We were trying to be general because we didn't want to be so specific as to exactly where till the professionals come in.
Sure. And you don't have to be extremely specific as to the locations, but general indications. And I like the use of arrows more than circles. So just a general area where you're looking to implement your improvements per system, then that's perfectly fine. I've seen one of the EHPs that I did for another facility in Lower Manhattan. They primarily used arrows and color-coded every arrow. So one arrow was for video, one arrow was for intrusion detection, and they offered a legend.
Great. So Mira, if you are able to come in, did you have specific slides that you want guidance on, since we're guinea pigs here?
Thank you.
Well, we don't hear her.
Oh, maybe it muted. All right. Well, you all know that whether it's myself or Ilya or David or your RSD, we'll still be available for questions as we go through.
I think everything is. I will definitely color code. Everything will make it more clear. Only one question. So, in in last week's or 2 weeks ago, the first part of the EHP presentation, you mentioned that it's better to put in more than we actually asked for in case we are allocating the funds to a different project. But it's not necessarily what we asked in the IJ. So let's say we are putting in the EHP 14 cameras, but in the IJ, the budget allowed us for 9. Do we have to modify that?
Dov, may I defer to you on this one?
Please. I think we're jumping between two different guidance things, but it's a great question, and we'll close off there. Basically, what we're saying is definitely, first of all, within your approved categories. We're not saying ask for things that don't exist.
Right.
But let's say for doors, really forced entry doors can be very expensive. You might have put in your IJ to do all your exterior doors. I don't know how many that is. Let's say that's more than your budget allows. But if you found out and you realized through our discussions that, oh, you're only going to be able to do your front doors because of your budget, but your IJ actually says you want to do all the doors, at least mark all the doors. And if budget doesn't get you there, at least you're not pigeonholed because of the EHP.
Mhm.
Does that clarify it a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what we did consistently. We have somewhat more locations, so we have wiggle room down the road.
And that's a very good approach because as you pick up more discussions with your grant reps, it gives you a very good justification to explain to them, hey, our projects are obviously complicated. It's a multi-system project, multiple improvements, right? So we've overshot here, but we understand that the budget will allow a finite amount. And we always tell our every client that, somebody says, well, I'm only going to apply once for 150 grand and it's going to cover me for the entire facility. In most cases, $150,000 gets spent very quickly. And people sometimes don't realize how expensive some of these systems, when properly designed and implemented, how much that costs. And so that budget gets used very, very quickly. So we very much suggest that you try to add as many locations around your facility that you're trying to improve, and then have a conversation with your grant rep to walk them through what it is that you're doing per your IJ.
And it's good advice because Dov and my favorite grant rep we've seen emails that say that's not in your EHP.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
All
exactly.
Right. Thank
Okay,
you very much, ladies, for the.
We're switching over. Dov, please keep going. I'm gonna. Who's our next participant?
And definitely some
Okay,
questions.
here we are. Again, I'm skipping the disclaimers, and I'm going to start with section A. And welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for going through it with me.
All right, so here we are again. I see, interestingly, again, for our audience here, pretty much in line with what we were saying before, to David's point, I think for file keeping reasons and for consistency, I suppose maybe adding NSGP 2022 and then the rest of your title, in other words, in the project title would be useful. And then I want to ask you if you have any particular areas that you wanted to ask us about.
So no, I was listening to the first project, and I saw that they kind of did what we did, where we just used the language from our submission, and that seemed like you said that was okay. I was concerned about that as well. If maybe we had to add certain keywords or be just more descriptive.
Right. So I'm reading through this now. So it's in the project description section. Unfortunately, somehow PDF here is not allowing me to highlight this text, but everything below the introductory project description paragraph and then the numbered sections are part of the project that it seems like you're undertaking. I have one comment.
Go ahead, yeah. So EHP really only requires your hardware installations. So this is a good example, Kelly. Obviously, again, as I always say, approve with your rep, but you don't need to put in the line about your security officers. right? That is something that doesn't require EHP approval. Same thing for training. It wouldn't require EHP approval. It's not something that needs to be compared to an environment, a historical building. So that's not what they're looking for. So if you hypothetically, if your location that only had security officers, even with an NSGP, you wouldn't be required to make an EHP, right? In that specific scenario, everybody, again, approve with your rep, but you most likely can remove this from your EHP.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I like that you also seem to have lifted much of this language from your assessment. It's pretty much consistent with what your application states. I like the idea from the previous team of stating what your budgets are, so that again you keep it all consistent, and to the person who's going to be reading this, they're going to say, okay, fine, so this is what budget this particular section is associated with. If you have those budgets, it might be useful to include them here. I think the language here, again, if you've taken it from your TVA and from your IJ, if it's consistent with that, then obviously you'll have one less conversation or more difficult conversation with your grant rep. But definitely, if they require any clarifications, obviously you'll have to modify a little bit. But it seems like this reads fine. I don't have any particular issues here. And thanks, though, for the comment about the security officers. Okay, I'll scroll down. Again, this is consistent. That's great. Section 1 and 3 are marked. That's fine. Going down, so that I believe, let me see, quantity of each. Yes, you're stating codes, and is that the right code, Dov? Are all of these under one code? Is that right?
No,
AEL codes?
we need, you're right. It's a good catch. We need to put in the AEL codes, the authorized equipment list for each of your approved IJ categories.
Oh, I was going to say each one of them was 14 SW-01 in our submission. I don't know if that was incorrect. I kind of I grouped them all together because they had the same code, the initial code.
It makes sense for efficiency. I don't argue with that,
Yeah.
but from what I've seen, what we've seen, mostly people put in the whole code.
Okay, so I'll probably have to put that on a separate page, right?
Yeah, a lot of people just like super minimize it or somehow figure out how to make 2 lines. But yeah, that's a good point too. That throughout this form, it says if needed to make an attachment and refer to the attachment. In many places, you can do that. Yeah, they didn't really give us enough room for this. It could work, and if you try it and the rep says it's okay, definitely let us know and we'll share with everybody.
Yep.
But it's correct that each one of those, the wall, the door, the video alarm, they're all 14 SW-01. Is that the right code, or is that a way I can verify that?
We can get you if you can write to us offline, we can definitely get you on our list.
Those are numbers, but again, our general rule is don't make the bureaucrats think. If you help it, I can decode it because I know what Pax and Vita are. They're looking for, do you have 14 SWs? If you can't use an enter within that form, try a control enter. That might work. If not, attach.
So section 3 is marked off. Let me see if it's doing enhancements to existing structures. Yeah, that's fine. Section D needs to be completed. Nothing here. One moment. Right, so here we are in section D.
I had a question about B. We are changing the fencing in the front and the back of the synagogue. And I'm not exactly sure how deep any of the posts or anything are supposed to go. I'm assuming that this is if you have to do some major digging, you have to mark off B, or is that a correct assumption? I'm not exactly sure if we should be marking that one off.
David, let me pose this one to you. I remember you made a comment about this some time ago. Would ground disturbance be required to complete the project or training? And so with fence installations, Obviously, there would be ground disturbance, but I believe we talked about how a general comment could be offered that this information is not available at this stage of the project because it needs to be determined by installation professionals. Is that enough, David? Or
I would try that and, or call your program rep.
that's right. So
Call your program rep and say, we haven't seen the specs, but,
Yep.
When we create the specs, Dov, do you remember our fencing specs? Do we say something like, according to general industry standards for fencing?
It actually says based on manufacturer specifications, because it refers to what manufacturer requires for implementation.
Right.
And the truth is, any fence between one location or the next, the ground
Yeah.
could be different, the layout, the environment. It's hard to really give a one best answer. Obviously, this is the kind of stuff that FEMA is concerned about, and this is the perfect opportunity really where your rep is going to be your best guidance. Worst case, you don't put in everything they need here. You put in something like where we plan to put this much feet of fencing, at this part of our property. And if they say more information is needed, then you'll have to move forward with getting more information. But even if that's post January 6th, this is still an award that's yours, and they'll help you get it in whenever you can get all the information together. So I wouldn't
Correct.
sweat.
Elia came up with a good term according to manufacturer specifications, and it can only be determined by potential vendors. The reality is, if you are close to a watershed, they'll care. If you're not close to a watershed, they don't care. And most people are not close to watersheds or special green areas.
Correct. So in this case, I would still, if you're installing fencing, I would still mark it as a yes. That it would cause ground disturbance because you need to excavate a little bit. However, the rest of the stuff you could you defer to installation contractors and manufacturer specifications, and then mention it to your grant rep to say we're not at the stage where we can determine that information.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so here we're going through the age of structure, building, project site. I'm scrolling down. Please tell me if there are any other sections you wanted to for me to stop and
Okay.
react to.
No, none of these.
By the way, I want to make a comment here for site photographs, maps, and drawings. So there is this question B right here, 3B at the bottom of the section. Are there technical drawings or site plans available? For some facilities, there might be some drawings, and those could be useful. However, one thing I want to caution everybody about is that you have to be very careful providing drawings, because one slight modification that happened to your facility structure, be it outside or inside, that doesn't look like, doesn't represent, is not represented on the drawing. Let's say the drawing is 5 years old, but you've made modifications to the facility, let's say in the last 3-4 years, that could cause a significant delay, because they'll start looking at this and say, wait a second, we don't see how the two coincide. This is not a current drawing. This gets picked up often, and unfortunately may delay the whole process. So if you do have drawings, make sure that they're properly updated and they reflect actual conditions of your site.
So there's plans now that are in the works, but it's probably going to be several years down the road. I don't know if it's, but different renovations that are planned for the back end of the building.
Yep.
Would this be this wouldn't be applicable to this application process?
This is work in progress, then I would not include it.
Okay.
I simply wouldn't, because it'll cause you more headaches than not.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so then we're talking about environmental documentation. I see that your answers are fairly standard, and it's a no. So again, you're basically meeting, I guess, the baseline requirements, and there's not a significant emphasis here for FEMA to worry about. But again, obviously, it'll differ facility by facility. Okay. I'm going to Appendix A. Again, this is just guidance for facilities. I don't think there was anything else. This is just examples. Was there anything else, or can we jump to your photo set?
Yeah, we can jump. There was one question I had about, there was a question, I think it was above, about adjacent properties. And I wasn't sure if that just meant adjacent to the left and right, because the way that the building is, there's also buildings that are separated by like an alley, like houses that are separated like an alleyway, and then there's houses behind us. Do I have to include those addresses? Yeah, under 2B?
My understanding of adjacency is, and this is something you can verify with the grant rep, but for your particular situation, again, we can't stress enough that grant reps could be very useful in these cases, so you don't waste any more time. But I would ask that question of them. The problem is that I, sitting on my side, I can qualify adjacency my way, but we need to stick to how FEMA qualifies adjacency. Okay, it could mean like a wall that joins the two buildings, that they're attached, or it could mean that there's an alleyway, but the buildings are considered to be adjacent. Any other thoughts, David?
I'm looking up the Landmarks Preservation Commission definition of adjacency. Is this a New York City property?
Kind of like a unique kind of, it's one of the only areas that have like an alleyway. I think in the pictures, you'll see what I'm talking about a little bit better, but there is an alley, and then right behind the building, there's houses as well that share the alley.
I would include those because it doesn't hurt to include it. It might take a little bit longer for them to, to go out and check it, or to check it on Street View or something like that.
Okay, so here we are. Tell me if you cannot see the screen. So
Yeah,
there's
you can see it.
page, the ground level photos.
Yeah, I can see it. So the building is the one in the middle. It's on the right side. There's a house actually attached to the synagogue, and then there's an apartment building to the left that's not attached, but it's very close.
Attached is not necessarily adjacent. Adjacent means next door, in back of, or in front of.
Right. So I included the apartment building, even though it's not attached. It's just the houses that are behind the building that I wasn't sure about.
Okay, if we have to take this offline in the interest of time, that's, we should do that, but we'll get you an answer. Hopefully, if we can find the information about qualifications. If not, then the best bet would be your grant rep, just to qualify what adjacency means. One thing that I would recommend right off the bat here is, if you recall how we walked through documentation, the labeling of the document that you should be following must include the facility address, the full name, page numbers. So please stick to that format as much as you can. And another thing that I'll mention, it is best if all of your labeling and all of your facility photos are included in a single file. The more files you throw at the grant rep, the more confused they're going to get, because they're going to say, well, why am I seeing this? Why am I seeing that? Right? If you need to simply demonstrate adjacencies, you have a photo right here on the first page to say, here's our facility, here are the adjacent facilities, and you're missing the aerial photo. So all of those little things could delay the approval process. I'm sorry, but it seems like it's quite a bit of bureaucracy here, but that's what you're going to likely face. So you have a moment here to make improvements to your file.
You're saying that the aerial photo has to be first on this page?
Well, typically it's included on the cover page with the name of the project, the facility name, full facility name, as stated in your formal application documents, right? Or in your EHP screening form, then the address, full proper address for the facility, and then the title of the document, meaning that, what is this document about? Then you need page numbers, and that should be maybe even the reference to the year, to the NSGP and the year of the grant.
Okay.
All right. So basically, when you go back to this video, you want to, I suppose, if you're able to see the way synagogue did that, I think that's what I would recommend. That's a good format.
Okay.
All right.
Just to reiterate that, I don't know if that's what you were saying, Ilya. Just to reiterate that, I believe each page should be labeled with name and address.
Yes, correct.
Okay, just make sure everyone's clear on
Thank
that.
you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Good point. Yeah, super. And again, interestingly, we're talking about technicalities here, and though I'm sure the rest of the community that are joining us today are expecting to see labels and these here's what we're looking for, a security system and stuff like that. I hope you can appreciate how many facilities have been struggling to actually get the EHP approved because of these technicalities. It's not about how well they've demonstrated where they want security. That may not be the issue. It's the actual format, believe it or not. Okay, so we implore you to follow it as closely as you possibly can, and reach out to other facilities that have done it and have received approvals, and just copy. Just don't waste your time. So
by the way, Ilya, you gave a commercial for PowerPoint before at the beginning of this session. One thing the PowerPoint has is headers and footers.
yeah,
and
totally.
Put your building and address in the footer and an identifying thing, and then it automatically shows up on every page.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and I've said it many times before, and again, in the interest of time, I don't want to belabor this, but there are people, I'm sure, at every facility or associated with every facility that know PowerPoint well, be it as somebody's kid or a person who's spent their years working with PowerPoint for years. They are your best bet because they know how to navigate it. It's a huge time-saving measure when you can have somebody who knows PowerPoint well, because it is a powerful application. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next couple of photos. So see again, the simple thing that's missing here is labeling. Okay. And you need to be very, very consistent with that. And I like the fact that you're trying to demonstrate all of the sides of your facility. That's very good for the person who's trying to familiarize themselves with what it looks like. These are very, very good. You cannot imagine how many blurry photos we've seen in EHPs. So these look actually pretty good. But again, please don't forget that each side of the building needs to be properly labeled for the side. If it's the southeastern corner, for argument's sake, that's how it needs to be labeled. So for example, the photo on the right here, if I know nothing about your facility, I don't know what I'm looking at. I see some garbage bags, I see some garbage bins, I see some mixed fencing and wall, but I don't know what I'm looking at actually.
When you take your overhead view from Google, there is an inset that shows you what's north, east, south, and west. So, just be consistent with that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what groups of photos I had to describe more than others. Like,
sure.
There's another file that I have where it actually goes into, but yeah, I guess every photo needs to have some kind of descriptor. This is the northern side of the building. This is the back entrance through the alley, whatever it might be.
And please remember, not just the photo itself, but also every slide page.
Right.
David said it needs a footer that just removes the need to relabel every page as you go. Just put your facility's name, the address, and the page number. Documents get separated when they're printed out. It's like a bunch of people review them just for consistency's sake. Okay. Next one, I see that you're starting to label. Again, it's not yet security applications, but again, be very, very clear as to why it's necessary to show these photos. Okay, is this a driveway to the back of your property? Then that's how it would start off here. Okay, and I think we can finish here. I apologize. We have like 3 or 4 additional files from you. We probably won't be able to get through them. We want to give the last participant an opportunity. Dov and David, do you have any other suggestions, questions, or also for Kelly, do you have any questions for us here?
Well, I'll just interject really quick. I talked with our third guinea pig. For the sake of time, we might not get to them. But in fact, I believe they actually did submit their EHP. So we're proud of everyone for continuing to move on. So let's continue to vote. There's not a ton of questions, and we'll definitely try to get to this in the next few minutes.
Very good. I can switch to the next file if that's all right then.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, cool. Hold on.
Thank you, Tzvi.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. I appreciate it. I mean, these are like the little things that really matters, the labeling and just making sure it's clear.
Right. Like Ilya's been saying, that's kind of what David's been saying and stressing is that these labels like this exactly is what's important to make sure we follow the format and make it
So here we
easy
are.
to digest.
Yeah, so by now, I probably don't need to belabor the point that like we suggested a color-coded system and a legend for the reader, because you cannot assume that these people understand anything about security. If you show them arrows and circles and you don't really help them understand what you're trying to do, they're going to get lost. And then you're going to get an email saying, please walk me through this, which now invites much more time for you. Right, so you probably want to be as consistent as possible and as clear as possible. Now, you're talking about two different systems here. You're talking about video surveillance on the one hand, then you're talking about access control on the other, right? Do you also have door hardening for your front entrance door?
Yeah, I'm not.
Right,
I think I might have. Yeah. Go ahead.
You
Sorry.
have it in the sentence above in the upper left corner, but
Right.
you don't actually identify where you're at on your photo. So be very clear about front door, arrow to front door, forced entry. Then a section of the building where you want the camera, arrow, camera. Right. Just make sure you kind of follow what we discussed and just color code and provide a legend.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll add this. That
Sorry?
I do like how Kelly set up the general areas, right? So it doesn't pitch you to an exact corner, to an exact place where the is going to be. So once we have that legend and label each page with the address, you're very close.
Exactly. That's I like all the photos you've taken. They're probably the clearest I've seen so far. Okay, so that's not the issue. The issue is kind of just so that you can impress the reader by walking them through what systems you're trying to implement without overwhelming them with the same colors and same labels that pretty much kind of confuse them. So that's the only comment here. I'm going to jump to the next one. So we're inside now. You want to walk us through this, or should I just read off what's?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is the entrance, the front door that we saw from the other slide. This is the inside, and directly behind it is the steps that go into the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure if I needed to also include extra photos that kind of show the layout so that it's obvious that the entrance goes up to. I wasn't sure if there needed to be additional photos to kind of, because all this, of course, I'm explaining to you, but unless you've been inside the building, it's kind of hard to understand that the sanctuary is right behind the entrance.
Well, you probably want to offer, because this is what I typically ask for clients that I work with, is that you should think about taking photos and demonstrating them in the EHPs as if you're giving somebody a tour, right? So as we move from the main entrance door, you would want to show me your foyer and also point in the direction of where the sanctuary is, right? So it may not be like, you don't need to really do a panoramic photo which shows both, because it gets distorted, but you can indicate a direction where the sanctuary goes and then show a photo to the sanctuary. So almost make it a flow. So in here, instead of 2 photos, I might have included 3 photos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One thing that I add here is that you're asking for new devices, and also you're showing that you're replacing devices, because I see a video surveillance camera in the right photo at the top there above the door.
Mm-hmm.
So be very, very specific about what you're adding and what you're replacing.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I believe the EHP guidance only allows for 2 pictures per page, so it would just have to be a 3rd page.
Oh, okay, my bad. So then to avoid any conflicts here, just indicate somehow with an arrow by the front door what direction the sanctuary is. That's all.
And just to reiterate, right, clarity for the reviewer is always beneficial. You know, they're seeing some suggestions in our chat, maybe the floor plan or whatnot. It's not required per se at this stage. But, you know, definitely for yourself, when you get to the RFP stage, you're going to want to do that, just not to get too far ahead of ourselves. So, you know, it could help for clarity, but this is what they want to see. If it's your front door and what you're doing there, they know what they're looking at, especially because you provided the exterior pictures.
Exactly, and what Dov is saying is super important here. That we said it multiple times before in previous webinars, even last year or earlier this year. Sorry, last year. I apologize. I'm lost between 22 and 23 now. But what we said consistently was that imagine that I'm a contractor, right? The best document you could possibly offer me to try to give you a bid is the photo set. Like for me to understand what I'm dealing with, and how many devices and where and why, and what you're adding is new and what you're replacing and what you're reinforcing. The best way to demonstrate it is this photo set. Okay, so this becomes super important, and it keeps you on track to explain to every contractor you're going to be dealing with what scope they're responsible for. Okay, so this is aside from, if you have, like I said, if you have floor plans, great. If you don't, so use this photo set. Okay, I'm going to jump to the next. Right, so again, probably just be clear here that these are new cameras. Unless you already have, I cannot see if you have any cameras there. I don't think I see any. So just make sure you indicate that new cameras to be added in these spaces. And very importantly, I go back to what Dov said, that it's 2 photos per page. So that's one. And second, please label every location and areas. It seems like it's part of the sanctuary, but make sure you indicate sanctuary left side, sanctuary right side, whatever. Some people use the geolocators like southwest, southeast, whatever. But that's something to be as clear as possible.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to go to the next one. Right, so when you label with text, so for example, the left photo here, you're saying door to office, where all alarm camera system monitoring systems will be located. It's a very good, I guess, indication. So just make sure that you probably want to add some sort of an arrow or something that you'll say that this is a future security closet or something like that, right? Or a security room, right? To store equipment. So just again for clarity's sake, because if I put myself in the shoes of a grant rep and I'm reviewing this and I'm looking at the photos and I'm seeing all the arrows and circles, and on one photo I don't, then I'm asking myself, what is this? Okay.
Nothing to do with EHP, but remember that you need ventilation in any area where you're putting all this equipment, or else it's likely to overheat.
Yeah, all of this equipment, it's like your servers and computer workstations. They require sufficient cooling and ventilation so that they don't break down quickly. So that's fine. So then again, we have the basement sanctuary. You're talking about cameras. You should be specific also about where you would like the panic button to be placed. Sometimes panic buttons are wireless, and so you should be careful to indicate where they would be used. So for example, when there is a prayer service going on, right? So likely the panic button would be in the area of the front of the sanctuary where the rabbi would stand, right? And so that's where you would make that indication.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like you're probably hearing like a lot more detail, but that's really what you should get to. If you're talking about multiple devices or multiple systems in one space, video surveillance, and then intrusion detection or panic alarms, those are the ones that you should be describing very clearly here, and probably using different color codes. Okay, then more cameras here. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, again, so pretty much the same commentary. Dov said it also correctly that it is nice that you're being general about the locations because you can never be precise where those would be mounted. For example, on the right photo, you're indicating with a circle where you want the camera. Likely, it's not going to be in that location because a security contractor likely will mount it farther down and above the door rather than by the handlebar, because that's an easy area to compromise the camera because I'm at shoulder height with the camera, and you don't want the cameras to be in close reach of anyone, right? So you would want the camera to be at least 8 feet high from human reach. Or from floor, I should say. All right, so those are just simple things, but again, you're not wrong. It's just the contractor will tell you, no, you shouldn't have a camera by the railing there. Okay, again, labeling of the locations, probably super important here. Typically, if I'm reinforcing a door, you're not asking for it here, but I'll just use an example here in the left photo. If you're reinforcing, you would need to have a more close-up shot of that door. So the reader would see what it looks like and what kind of hardware is on it and so on. Okay, particularly that's helpful if the doors are dilapidated. So, Dov, how are we doing on time? We can
I think after this deck, we should probably close out. Fortunately, there are only a few questions, and some we answered live in the chat, which we don't usually do. But yeah, let's finish the slide up, turn it over to a couple questions, and then we'll probably have to close up for the day. But everyone remember that, please reach out to your RSDs. If you want to follow up with us offline to finish anything we didn't cover, we're definitely still available.
Here's a good point, by the way. So on the left photo, you have an arrow in a circle pointing to a potential camera location. You want to be very careful because here you're pointing to an adjacent building. And I use adjacency the way I understand it. So, but in any case, you just want to make sure that you're clear about a little bit closer to where you want the camera to be. Maybe instead of just saying camera, you would say camera on top of the roof structure, the synagogue's roof structure. And also as you're alarming the gates, that's probably going to require a separate color code just to be more descriptive, and so the reader could understand. Okay.
I just wanted to confirm for every door I have to, that we are going to put like some kind of like motion detection or door alarm. I have to label each door that has to have that we're planning on hooking up to the alarm
every
system.
location where you're adding security equipment or where you're reinforcing. Yes, it is a huge investment of time. I completely respect it. And some folks will say, well, I'm throwing up my hands. I don't know what to do here, right? I can assure you that that's an upfront investment of time that will help save you from tremendous headaches down the road. The reason being is that whenever you're unclear and the project moves on, let's say 5 months go by until you were ready to bid it, right? Everybody forgets what you wanted. And if the EHP is not specific and clear enough about every location, then how are you presenting your project to the bidders? You might be very, very inconsistent about what it is that you're actually looking to implement. And once you also have to clear the hurdle once you've submitted the bid, the RFP, and once you start getting the bids, you have to go back to your grant rep and tell them, okay, so here's what we're going to do, right? So you get approval to proceed. Right, so you will use the EHP document, particularly the photo set, to guide the contractors for them to quantify how many devices they will have through the facility, where they're going to be located, what kind of cabling that's going to be necessary. So otherwise, you're leaving them in the dark. So if you only indicate half of it and you forgot to do the rest, even if you get approval for the EHP, it's probably going to cause you more headaches down the road. I'm happy to switch over to chat, to questions if we have any additional ones. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to both of guinea pig locations, and thank you to Ilya. Last year I think we just did one location. This time I think there was definitely benefit to see two. We had a third lined up, but obviously we get too excited with it all and wasn't able to get to the third location. So thank you to Tzvi. I think most questions in the chat, just to jump right to there, Ilya, were answered. Remember that the EHP guidance allows for attachments. David provided a link to find out information about other New York City buildings. There's a question if you can do that for Westchester. David just provided a potential link there. So click if that was your question or you need that for Westchester, please take that link now before we close up in the next minute or so. And then there was a question about how can the photos be posted. As you can see from the EHP tutorial, you can post them vertically, you can post them horizontal, but it seems like the guidance wants you not to do more than 2 a page. Let's see, just trying to run through any last questions. Ilya, if you see any, please feel free to jump in. I'm sure you didn't have the chat up. The question, two last questions I'll take, and I'm going to stop there. Is it possible to change the EHP down the line? Is it a long process? So it is, because if you looked at the guidance from the state, it can take a couple months for FEMA to approve your EHP. So if you want to change your EHP, which means you're probably moving some funds or a new category, which requires an IJ modification, an investment justification modification, something we'll talk about in a future topic, Consultant's Corner, you would have to also, because you're making a change to your project, you would have to do a new EHP. So probably another 4 or 5 months should be budgeted in your timeline to design the new HP, do the documentation, and get the new HP approved. Could be much quicker, but at least a couple months.
Dov, I'm going from the bottom. I apologize if I missed any, but I see a question here. So the EHP is called the Environmental and Historic Preservation Screening Form, but this is really a pre-bid form for dishes and us, correct? And my point is, it's not the form is just a screening form. Your EHP package actually contains of multiple documents that you're going to be submitting for approval. I have found that the photo sets, not the screening form, but the photo sets from the EHP have been instrumental in facilitating bids, okay, and walking the contractors through your project, okay? Dov, I noticed you were shaking your head. What comment?
My read on this is the question is, let's just be clear, this is a post-award requirement. If you have received an NSGP at the beginning stages, including executing your contract, it requires EHP approval. If you are applying for a grant, this does not apply to you. If you have the hate crimes grant, this does not apply to you. This is only if you have been awarded a federal nonprofit security grant program. So the form is part of the EHP package you have to submit, but that's how I'm reading the question. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yep, and like I said, if you ask me, the successful facilities that have been able to curate the bids that they received and then be successful in accepting and implementing good projects have used EHP to their advantage. Particularly the photo set, the labeled photo set from the EHP, because it's much easier, short of labeled drawings and other specifications, to walk contractors through your project, okay, and hold them responsible to implementing everything that's on that document, okay? So that's my interpretation of the use of the EHP once it's been approved, okay? It goes into your RFP package. That's what I suggest. All
right. With that, we're way over time. We appreciate everyone sticking with us. Good luck. EHP should be submitted this week. Reach out to your RSDs here on our team or your DHSES rep. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ilya.
Thank you all. Have a good day.